Hello, my name is B.A. Sparks, also known as Carrion Crows. Longtime Battletech fan, I have a background in game and art design and other blah 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 things, but we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about one of my favorite games ever, MechWarrior Online. First and foremost, let's give props where props are due, to PGI, for creating one hell of a game. I'm enjoying that immensely, as I'm sure some of you guys are as well. This volume, we will cover the basic Battlemech balance in regards to the Battlemech handling, equipment, and the variant tweaking of different Battlemechs themselves. The reason I'm limiting this particular feedback to just balancing Battlemechs rather than grouping in energy weapons, missile weapons, electronic warfare, it would simply be too unwieldy, and we can focus on one aspect without good points lost in the shuffle. So look for those particular topics in their own threads. First up, let's talk about Battlemech handling. For those of you familiar with the Battletech board game, are quite familiar with the function of a gyro. A gyro in Battlemech is a massive regulating device that allows a Battlemech to remain upright and balanced throughout the strenuous activity of rolling around, collisions, jumping, or other zany things that people do with them. Some of you closed beta folks might remember the days of collisions. Two Battlemechs slam into each other and plop, one falls down, or possibly both fall down depending on the tonnage. This happens because the initial kinetic impact or inertia is simply too great for the gyro to handle. Now personally, I hope they bring back collisions. And BGI has commented on bringing back collisions, but I realize them doing so might create a lot of problems. Not just for newer players, but for veterans who can abuse the system. Anyone remember Dragon Bowling? Simply having a large mech run over a smaller mech and kick it when it's down isn't any fun, and it isn't very forgiving either. Instead, the whole idea of collisions should directly tie into the aspect of both terrain and mech function. For those of you keeping your ear to the ground might have heard one of the devs announcing his wish to implement terrain features. For example, you run over rough terrain, it has an effect on your mech. You try to go up too steep of an incline, it has an effect on your mech. Whether it slows your mech, stalls your mech, or simply limits your mech from crossing. Now we already have something sort of like this, trying to make your mech go over really rough terrain, makes it pop, snap, kind of stutter, up and down, very jittery. I think this is more to do with the physics of the engine than the intended result of actual terrain features. Personally, I think terrain features is an excellent idea, and it ties directly into mech stability. Mech stability takes the aspect of the gyro, or more importantly, the aspect we would refer to as piloting roles in the board game, and combines it with a real-time application of MWO. Let's add the new Bitchin' feature called Gyro Unstabilized, flashing up their big rudders, right up there with the old popular incoming missiles and the ever-popular your base is being captured. Here's a few things that would cause your gyro to become unstable. Running full speed over rough terrain or seriously uneven terrain, not using your jump jets to soften a landing, falling from a large distance, the initial burst running into water, attempting to climb an incline too steep. Basically, these are all situations where your skill as a pilot is being tested for pushing your mech past its tolerances to fully utilize it. This isn't about the speed of the mech. You could have an Atlas going 48 kph, its maximum speed, and still have an unstable gyro for going over rough terrain. It's not about the speed, it's about the speed your gyro can handle. So as such, it should probably be based off your throttle percentage. Max percentage, more likely to cause unstabilized gyro. Once you clear the terrain or slow your mech or regain control after a couple of seconds of whatever action caused it to be unstabilized, the gyro unstabilized should fade and you're back to normal. What does this ultimately mean? Well, when your mech has a gyro unstabilized, it means your mech is unbalanced and vulnerable to being knocked down. You take an unstabilized mech, add in a collision, and boom, you got a knocked down mech. Example of collisions would be Battlemech hitting another Battlemech going above a certain speed, Battlemech hitting a wall, Battlemech taking a high amount of damage in a certain amount of time. The important thing here is not just collisions or knockdown mechs, but establishing a system. I'm a big fan of establishing a system, because when you define the rules, you will start to see here is skill. Yes, player skill, piloting skill. You can win by being a hell of a pilot, but a piss-poor gunner, and vice versa. This would allow for a great deal of tactical flexibility outside of just attempting to run another mech over. Let's say you get swarmed by light mechs, and you elect to make a defensive position in rough terrain. Now the light mechs can either reduce speed and attempt to control their gyro, or roll through there at max speed, suffering the gyro unstabilized. And if they suffer a collision during that course, whether they hit a teammate, they accidentally bump into you, they hit a wall, or you hammer them with a great deal of damage, they're going to be kissing the dirt. And if they kiss the dirt, knocked down, that could potentially be the final nail in the coffin for them. Or they could elect not to enter the rough terrain and try and fight you at range, where their speed and agility are less of factors because you can keep them in your gun sights the whole time. It's situations like these where skill is determined and could create some very fun and memorable experience with an MDO. Anything that increases choices as a pilot, I am all for. Okay, next up is equipment. Let's cover a few things, namely endosteel and ferrofibrous armor. I remain confident that PGI will solve the whole double heat sinks for single heat issues, but I'll briefly cover that as well. Simply put, give single heat sinks better heat dissipation. Pretty simple. Somewhere in the order of 1.2 HPS. External and an internal HPS of 1.4. What's the difference between internal and external, you say? Well, I won't get into that. Do a forum search, people will spell it out. If I get into it, we'll be here a lot longer than I want to be. So moving on, endosteel and ferrofibrous armor. Simply put, there isn't enough upside or downside to having this equipment. Here's what I mean by that. In general, most of the things you do after buying a Battlemech is probably the first thing you do is upgrade it with endosteel chassis. I mean, unless it's an assault mech where you need lots of room for double heat sinks, it's just a given. It's almost to the point where you tack the price on to upgrade at the cost of buying the Battlemech. I say there should be a benefit to running a standard structure outside of simply running out of slots. Namely, I think if you run a standard structure, your Battlemech should be tougher to kill. Standard structure is heavy and dense, and as such, if you have standard structure, you would gain a bonus of 20% hit points to the internal structure. Hear me out here. This doesn't mean that those people who have endosteel chassis, they won't be 20% easier to kill. You'll just have the same hit points as you always did. But in the case of mechs with standard structure, they'll simply be a little beefier and take a little more work to collapse a location. This will have two effects namely on the game, and I hate myself a little bit for saying this, but that might make running machine guns, flamers, LB-10X as the crit-seeking weapons they are now a little more viable. The harder it is to kill a location, the more viable having something like a crit-seeking weapon to clean out the modules in that slot. And this would be one of those effects. Now, I think machine guns, flamers, and LB-10X should be weapons in their own right, and I'll cover them in their own topics, but this would be a side benefit. The other benefit is mechs like the Atlas and the Stalker, and mechs that don't use endosteel structure will be much more durable, and that's a good thing. If you want to keep your mech tougher, you would consider using a standard structure. Next up, ferrofibrous armor. It has long been the bastard child of any type of upgrade, and the only extreme case would this remotely be worthwhile. Let's make it worthwhile. There are lots of talks and ways to go about this upgrade, but I'm all for the simplest one. It's not about slots, it's not about changing anything that messes with the canon of mechs, or how we'd have to reform the entire game to build designs like these. Simply allow a mech with ferrofibrous armor able to equip 20% more armor. Notice this doesn't mean that a mech comes with 20% more armor, or fools around with any of the Battlemechs built now, as the ferrofibrous will still require 14 slots. It simply raises the maximum that the mech is allowed to equip. All of a sudden, the person considering how they want to upgrade their mech has some tough choices. It's no longer about just saving weight. It's about durability and how durable you want your mech to be. So you wanted to make your mech absolutely hardest to kill mech it could possibly be, then you might consider a standard structure with ferrofibrous armor maxed out, getting 20% more structure and the ability to equip 20% more armor. Now these values can be tweaked if it's better at 12% or 16 or 25. Ultimately, that's more of a balancing thing, but at the very least, ferrofibrous needs to be a valid choice and it needs to be worthwhile, and this is one way to make it. Now onto the juicy bit. This is one feature of MWO that I believe should be removed. This is the zoom function. I know, some of you are already hitting the reply button trying to tell me how you disagree and hate this option, but power down for a second and hear me out. Notice this is the zoom function and not the zoom module. Do you ever notice how much you use zoom? I use it all the time. Not just all the time, but every time I pull the trigger. I am using zoom on a mech. I could be 70 meters away from a target and still have zoom in to use those small lasers to try and hit that location. The zoom function started out as a good idea because the netcode back then was really sloppy. It was sloppy enough that if you aimed at a location with your ballistics, you didn't necessarily always hit that location. The netcode was both your randomizer and your equalizer. Now, with all the improvements to both lasers, ballistics, and host state rewind, the zoom function is reaping a dreadful toll. That's why the current meta is built around PPCs, Gauss rifles, and to a lesser extent jump jets to get clear lanes of fire. Simply put, you can hit a mech's location at will with the 1.x and 3x zoom. This really isn't even much of a challenge being able to put pinpoint damage to any location you want. It really kind of diminishes the game. At the very least, what you'll see by removing the zoom function is that skilled pilots can still take those shots at long range, and even really skilled pilots can potentially land them in the locations where they want. But in general, the damage will still be there, it just won't be pinpoint. Thus, it brings back an element of randomness where the damage is taken from. Not at random as in you roll a d20 or 2d6 in the location you hit, but random in that people will aim for the Battlemechs rather than locations, and where you take damage is much hapstance as opposed to design. So why not the zoom module? Well, the question is easier to answer. The zoom module is okay and should be in the game itself because it's a big enough drawback that makes it a balanced piece of equipment. Now, I'm not talking about how grainy it is. I expect the devs themselves to clear that up and make it functional. I'm talking about the small picture within a picture. It's more powerful that you can see, but it's also limiting that you lose some situational awareness, as often the case my rear armor or my Battlemech's arm can attest to. Now that could even take the zoom function it is now, hike it up to 4x, and throw a filter around the edges and call it a zoom module. I would be okay with that. 1, because it's balanced, and 2, because it's an either-or state. You're zoomed in at 4x with the filter, or you're not. Last but not least, we'll move on to variant tweaking. Variant tweaking. Yes, I have issues. Not all mechs are created equal. Let's talk about arguably the worst designed Battlemechs in the game. These mechs are so bad that even using them in casual play is tedious and painful. God help the person who tries one of these mechs in a competitive player league. Ick. We'll start by tonnage. First off, the death knell. This mech sorta makes the list and sorta doesn't make the list. I own one, and I lack the proper words to explain what a betrayal this mech feels like. Not a betrayal in that it's a poor battle mech. It kinda is, but a betrayal of the ideal of the commando itself. The commando themselves are your hammer and an eggshell. Light brawlers, the guy that pop out an alleyway with a MAC-10, unload the magazine, and then run away while they reload. This was done in the form of SRMs. More specifically, my favorite build was the COM 2A. I loaded up that bad boy with 2 medium lasers, 2 SRM-6s with enough ammo to handle the long haul. You could jump out, unload all the SRMs and medium lasers, then duck back into cover. It was, for lack of a better term, a commando. The death knell hardly fits the bill as a close-range brawler. You don't have enough armor-sustained engagements, which is the whole reason for the hit-and-run tactics. But with only 4 medium laser, leaves this mech as a Jenner without the jump jets and tons too shy. Very underwhelming. Personally, I thought this mech should have gotten to 6 to 8 energy hardpoints in the arms, but when it comes to energy hardpoints, life gets rough. I mean, it takes very little to make a mech overpowered for its weight. At the end of the day, the massive issue with adding missiles to this mech would be the whole streaks. It would quickly take over the whole pay-to-win argument. Personally, my thought on making this mech bigger is very simple: a second AMS slot. There are only 2 other mechs capable of mounting 2 AMS, that is the Atlas K and the Stalker 5S. When you consider that this mech was piloted by a so-called instructor, it's not totally out of line to request such a mech to come equipped with dual AMS. For when his students get wily. Next up, the Spider. Oh boy, the Spider 5V and the 5K. Insert desk palm here. The Spider itself is probably hands down one of my favorite mechs. It's not my favorite mech in all of Battletech history. Really, it's neck and neck with the Commando. I give props to light mechs that can succeed when being outgunned. Well, in the case of the 5V, the Spider isn't just outgunned. It has like 0 guns. I get that PGI is attempting to make overtures towards staying true to the classic Battletech, but at the very least I expect them to create a viable variant worth using. This mech is a travesty, and worse than anything else. Anyone that wants elite status for their Spiders, specifically the Spider 5V because it's the only usable one, must buy this mech and use it. Or at the very least, it's one of the few mechs I've seen that people are willing to throw money at it to get it to go away. They'll pay money, convert their XP to GXP, and then promptly sell it off. At the very least, this mech should have 4 energy hardpoints. They should all be torso mounted. 2 energy hardpoints to the center torso, 1 energy hardpoint to each of the side torsos, bringing it up to 4 total. Here's why. By having all the torso-mounted energy weapons, this mech doesn't outclass the Jenner, even though it's 5 tons lighter, because all the energy points are torso-mounted, whereas the Jenner is capable of vertical tracking. Considering how useful ECM still is, there has got to be a reason to use this mech over the 5D. And no, 12 jump jets isn't it. What is having 4 energy hardpoints over the 5D's 3. Next up, this ties in, is with the Spider 5K. Now the Spider 5K, like the 5V, it just needs more cowbell. More cowbell in the form of another energy hardpoint. Now, another energy hardpoint will be mounted in the center torso. Now, God willing, you'll buff machine guns up to viable weapons. See my other thread on ballistic balancing. But even so, this mech is screaming out for something more. And more is in line with another energy hardpoint to the center torso. The reason both the K and the V need these energy hardpoints is because the 5D is just that good. Not only can it pack an ERPPC, it can pack 2 ERPPCs, it has the best hardpoint layout, it also equips ECM, which makes the other spiders, for lack of a better term, crap. You see a teammate pilot in a Spider 5V or a 5K, you just want to yell at them to either be on the other team or to get a real mech. I think we should make them real mechs. I want to believe. So following the Spiders, we come to the Cicada 3C. This mech is exactly the same boat as the Spider 5K, which is so bad. At the very least, the Spider 5K can fly through the air while being useless. Another energy hardpoint? Hell, even 2 other energy hardpoints in the same torso, same spot, is fine, bringing it up to 3 energy, 4 ballistic. Something to make this mech worthwhile, as right now it's the fat kid in the corner that nobody picks for dodgeball because he's useless and he knows it. So moving along, I believe that the rest of the mediums and heavies are balanced. To say they're the balance means that there's a reason for each variant. There's a reason why you would take that variant. Thus, there's a reason for that variant to exist. There are no clear-cut superior ones that just leave all the other ones worthless trash. In fact, it's not until you get to the assault range that we deal with more worthless mechs. First in the assault category is the Hero Mech Pretty Baby. I'm not sure if the general outcry for pay-to-win made PGI knee-jerk on the whole Pretty Baby issue, but it was one hell of a knee-jerk. I've spent countless hours going over and over the Pretty Baby looking for some magical weapon combination that makes it worthwhile. That makes it able to hold its own, that makes it, well, and awesome. I'll be damned if I can find one. The coolest thing about this mech is the video that was produced with it. In reality, it is suffering and suffering hard. Straight up, it needs another hardpoint. Make it an energy hardpoint, make it a missile hardpoint. It really matters very little. Put an energy in the arm or in the torso. Put in another energy hardpoint in the head does not count. Give it another missile slot in the torso, in the arm, but give it something. It's an assault mech that can't assault. This isn't about money or pay to win or the rift that floats around with those kind of ideals. It's about making a viable mech, and Pretty Baby just isn't up to snuff. So moving on, let's go up 5 tons to the worst battle mechs in the game, and arguably better than the Pretty Baby. Yes, I am talking about the Stalker 3H and the Stalker 4N. It's not that these mechs are really bad on their own, it's just the other Stalker variants do so much more, and have so many more hardpoints. These variants don't even have a quirk like extra torso twist and better engine ratings. They're essentially just an afterthought. Kinda like the Spider V, yes, I'm still bitter, but we're moving on. So let's give people a reason to take the Stalkers 3H and the 4N. First of all, I would like to give the Stalker 3H 8 energy hardpoints. Say what? Some of you are saying, but you heard me, 8 energy hardpoints and 4 missile. But let's keep all the energy hardpoints located in the arms. Some of you will cry out, 6 PPC Stalkers mounting all their weapons in the upper arms will be horrible. Well, they already mount 6 PPC Stalkers, and yes, some may choose to mount their Stalkers this way. But look at it this way, they're also giving up the torso twist range that the Stalker 3F have. So there's a little give and take here too. But at the very least, it'll make this mech unique. More than likely, if this was to happen, you'd see lots of people rolling around with 8 medium lasers or pulse laser Stalkers, which is cool. The Stalker 4N, I would walk a different path, and a much more simplified one. Raise the engine cap of this Stalker 4N up towards the 350-360 area. Make it the fastest Stalker out there. Boom. Useful. Unique. Without stepping over the corpses of the other Stalker variants. That's the point of making a mech useful. You bring them up to the same type you want the other mechs are at, without overshadowing them. And that brings Crow's Battlemech balance to a close. Feel free to comment and reply in the thread. Next week, I'm going to dive into Crow's ballistic balance, where I dive into artillery, machine guns, autocannons, and much more. Coming later after ballistics, I get into energy and missile balancing along with some electronic warfare. Remember to post your thoughts. Be loud, be vocal. Better to be heard, lest your silence be mistaken for acceptance.